The Escape Your Limit podcast gets close up and personal with some of the leading entrepreneurs in the world of fitness and wellness. You'll find out what drives them, fuels them, and motivates them to give one more rep, even when no one else is counting. So now over to your host, serial entrepreneur and co-founder of Escape Fitness, one of the world's leading functional training brands, Matthew Januszek.
Hi, and today I'm in Leather Lane, central London, and behind me is a disused car park. And in it is Gymbox. It's one of the coolest club chains in central London. And we're going to meet the co-founder, David Cooper, and he's going to tell us about how it all started. Follow me. Right, so today we're in the basement of stylish Gymbox Club in central London with the co-founder, David Cooper.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, very good, David. So you call yourselves the antidote of gyms. You know, what have gyms done wrong to you?
Well, I don't think they did anything wrong. I think it's, well, if you go back to when we originally started this, I think what the premise was is they were boring.
Yeah.
I think that's where the whole nucleus of Gymbox came from. I mean, we're talking 13, 14 years ago now, but most gyms basically all look the same. It was kind of white walls, shiny floors, classical music in the changing rooms, same kind of class formats, and we just thought it was a bit boring. Richard, who's obviously was my partner right at the beginning, he was the guy that came up with the original concept, and I think he was in America, and he was going to a chain of gyms at that stage called Crunch Fitness. They're still around. But they did things very differently. I think they kind of, you know, they did classes with drag queens, and then one day there'd be a professional boxer. And he said the atmospheres were amazing. Of course, coming back to the UK, there was nothing like that. So I think that's where initially the idea is we could do something like that. Although you couldn't really take that format, that was a bit too American high-fiving. We had to put a British gritty spin in it, and I think that's where Gymbox came from.
Yeah. So if I just take you back, because I've known you and Richard for a long time, and in fact I think you kind of started the business at a similar time to me, and I actually remember sitting down with Richard giving me a bit of branding business advice when we first started. So I've seen you come a long way really from that first club, not too far from here, looking at the guy who did the drawings on the wall. I think what was he, sort of like a street artist or something?
Yes, right, yeah. An illustrator.
An illustrator, yeah. So I think even from those first days you're sort of a little bit wacky. But what, in terms of your story, you know, tell us about sort of, you know, where did you start? Where did you grow up? And, you know, what was...
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Buckinghamshire, which is just outside London, about an hour outside London. Yeah. My background comes from all over the place. I mean, I've done, I've been a car salesman. I've worked in traditional health clubs. But my background in terms of exercise is... just a little bit before that, because I know you're a bit of a sports person. I've heard you're pretty handy in a boxing ring. Yeah,
but what sort of motivated, were you, you know, from school days, did you sort of have a, you know, was this something you from very young, or was it until you left school that you sort of...
My family, if you look back, they were a sporting family. So my grandfather was a boxer, my great-grandfather was a boxer, and I think I naturally just gravitated towards combat sports. Right. Originally, I did martial arts. I kind of just did that traditional sort of karate, kickboxing. Did well. I fought for national titles and things like that. A bit bored because I wasn't very good with my legs. So the natural progression for me was to move into boxing. Right. So I started boxing. This was in High Wycombe, which was outside London. Eventually moving up to London, and then I started with a club called Fisher Boys, which was an amateur boxing club, and worked with a guy called Jim McDonald, who's now a very well-known professional boxing coach. And I kind of dabbled in that with boxing. I don't think I would ever have made it completely, so I got out at the right time before I had that unlucky lesson of realising that I wasn't going to do very well. So yeah, I came from a combat sports background and weights as well. I think that, you know, even from a young age, I dabbled in weights, probably not knowing exactly what I was doing, but I was always into strength training, which went with obviously with the combat sports as well.
Right. And when did you sort of, what age did you sort of think that was something, you know, did you leave school and you knew what you wanted to do, or were you sort of in your final years of school thinking, you know, a bit like me, I guess, what do I do now?
I had zero idea when I left school.
Right.
I think I kind of drifted along from one job to another, figuring out what I wanted to do. I think it was round about the age of about 20, 21, I realised that I wasn't going to make it as a boxer. So I thought I have to be serious about doing something. And I think that's the stage I thought, well, fitness was probably the route that I was going to go. And I think I saw an ad in one of these, sort of in the press, for a company called Holmes Place.
Right.
Which was a fairly big chain at the time.
Yeah.
And I applied to work for them. And I went that route into fitness through sales, management, area management.
Yeah.
And that's when I realised that obviously fitness really was the career that I wanted to concentrate on.
And what were some of those earlier jobs that you did then? Yeah.
Oh God, I was a car salesman, which I was very good at. Which I loved, actually, funny enough. Prior to that, I did some tree surgery. Before that, I've worked in a toy shop, which I had a great time as well, to be honest. But this was just finding my feet a little bit.
Yeah.
And then obviously after car sales, that's when I realised that it's not really for me, and that's when I went into fitness.
Yeah.
And that's when I started with Holmes Place.
And with that, I talk to a lot of people, and they say about how do you find your passion and sort of know what you're going to do. You know, when you went into that Holmes Place, did you sort of feel this was now your career, and ever imagine that you was going to be sort of, you know, running a chain of clubs, or how?
You know what? It's a kind of, I knew it was the career I wanted to do because I was passionate about it. You know, I don't think it was that traditional health club kind of thing was probably not right for me, because I was training a lot in those days, and I wouldn't choose to train in a club like that. It just felt, again, there was no atmosphere. It felt a little bit like a 5-star hotel. I didn't feel comfortable in that kind of. I knew I wanted to be in that industry. I still hadn't found out what part of that industry I wanted really to be in. I didn't want to go the fitness route. I wasn't interested in that. I didn't want to be a personal trainer or anything like that. I knew that I wanted to make a change at some point and change people's atmosphere, you know, because certainly at that stage, fitness, it had things like, you know, you had to wear a t-shirt. You weren't even allowed to wear a vest in the gym. And all these went against all of my kind of beliefs at that kind of time. So I was still trying to find out at that sort of stage where I wanted. But I knew I wanted to do something different. Yeah.
And was that from an exercise perspective, or was it sort of more, you know, global and thinking, well, you know, the whole space, you know, the whole fitness experience?
I think it was, I mean, the people I trained with, you know, and the clubs that I used to go to, I mean, I used to go to some, you know, spit and sawdust gyms and boxing clubs, but the atmospheres were amazing.
Right.
You know, they could always generate amazing atmospheres, and, you know, the culture there, people didn't leave that culture. I mean, if you go to a climbing club, you know, there's people been in these climbing clubs for 20 years, and gyms just didn't have that atmosphere. You go in there, you join, you know, I don't think there was no brand loyalty. I don't think the people wore a t-shirt and felt proud of being part of that brand. So I always wanted to create gyms that had those cultures as well, that people loved to train, but because you create this tribe of people that wanted to be there. And I think that's where I felt the gym industry was going wrong back there. They just didn't have that loyalty back then. And I think that's what I wanted to do.
And how did you go then from being a trainer at Holmes Place?
No, I was into management. I was at sales first and then went into management.
So how did you then go from being a manager or in management to what happened next then? What happened?
So straight after that, I was headhunted by a company in Scandinavia.
Right.
It was a chain of about eight gyms, and I decided at that stage I had enough with that Holmes Place kind of thing, so I decided to go to Scandinavia. happened to have a Scandinavian girlfriend at the time as well, which helped a lot with that move across. So I went over there. Prior to going, I was managing a gym in sort of central London, and that's when I met Richard.
Right.
Richard was kind of an oddball character. He was one of these guys who you would see in the free weights area wearing those big baggy trousers, the weight training belts. No matter what exercise he was doing, he would always have to wear a weight training belt. Now that could be sit-ups, he was still wearing a weight training belt. So, and we started chatting. I think at this stage, Richard he came from an advertising background, got bored of advertising, and obviously wanted to do something as well. And we started talking about this concept that he'd seen in America and what he wanted to do over here. But he hadn't got any experience in the fitness world. So we talked about what we hated in the gyms, what we wanted to do differently. And I think that's where this nucleus of an idea started to form itself.
And what was that like? A couple of mates just sitting around, chatting about ideas, or in the pub sort of thing, or was it a serious, like, we're going to do a business here, or?
It started off more of a case of this oddball character coming up to me going, I've got a good idea, we should talk about it sometime. And I think that probably process happened for about 2 or 3 months. I was getting slightly put off by this guy who kept on coming up at me and asking to meet me like this. But in the end, we decided to meet, and just loved what the idea was. Right. I think at this stage we were trying to raise money because none of us come from money. We didn't have any idea how to do this. Richard was desperately trying to raise money, and at this stage I was going over to Sweden as well. So we carried on this conversation even when I was living abroad.
And did that seem, like at the time, because you're obviously sort of working for someone and then thinking, because it's not a small amount of money that first club was, what was going through your mind? Was it, did you sort of believe that, someone was going to, lend you the money, or was it kind of more of a, like, well, fingers crossed? What was going through your mind when you thought we need to get a couple of million or something? Richard, to be fair to him, he dealt mainly with that regional raising of that funding initially, because I was based in Sweden at that sort of stage. And we went loads of different routes. So there was, first of all, the traditional is begging friends and family to raise money, which got a certain amount, but not enough. Yeah. Then we went the route of saying, look, we've got this great idea. Could we talk to one of the big operators, take a section of their gym and run this idea within inside their gym? And we got close to doing that. Then what happened was, I'm sure Richard won't mind me saying this, is that he had a business plan set out, and he had a party, I think, at his house, or a dinner party at his house, and he had a business plan set out. And the story that he tells me was that at some stage, one of these guys had gone to the toilet or something at this party, and he found the business plan on the table and started flicking through it. And he thought, wow, this is an amazing idea. He said, you should talk to someone I know. And at this stage, he knew this guy called Mike Balfour, who was the owner of Fitness First at the time. And I think Richard was annoyed to begin with that someone was flicking through his business plan. But in the end, he said, okay to this. Went and met Mike Balfour. Mike Balfour loved what the concept was about, and I think within about an hour conversation, agreed to lend in the money for the first site. Wow. But that was on the premise that it was kept completely aside from Fitness First. Right. Gymbox basically ran, or myself and Richard ran everything to do with that. Yeah. They literally put the money in. They got the upside, obviously, but there was no link between the two clubs. Okay. And that's how it was. So it was a stroke of luck where we raised the money. So then, when you given this amount of money, which was probably how much? Is it roughly? What are we talking? A couple of million, a million?
About then, yeah.
Yeah. So you got this money, and then how did you feel that now you've got to sort of actually make that work? Was it a bit daunting to think that you got to get or did you think this is a great idea and we're going to kill it? What was going through your mind?
Oh, I think look, we all thought it was a great idea. To say that we were nervous, absolutely. Yeah. Were people going to warm to this idea? That was a complete worry. We were building a concept, and I think there was a massive fear to begin with. Thinking back to those days, but also a lot of excitement as well, because what we were doing, we were really passionate, we really believed in as well. We had a great location. We managed to secure a location in Holborn, which was a fantastic location. We did a very short pre-sale where we try and join members before the club opens. And that went better than we thought. So I think we went into it with fear, but a lot of excitement as well.
Right. And was it that first location? I sort of heard, and I'm not sure how accurate it was, but when you were opening and then there was a flood or something, was that the first one, or was that another?
No, that was the first one.
So tell us about that.
So yeah, we launched Holborn, and the building above us, the sprinkler system went. Right. And we came in one morning and it was literally 2 inches in water covering the whole of the gym. Richard just walked out and went home, which I think as the majority shareholder, I think probably he was right to do that. And it was amazing. It was, in some ways we were like, oh my God, we managed to get the water cleared up. It ruined the floors. We had all these painted floors, so all the paint lifted. The members were amazing. Because we created this brand which they loved, the members basically, even though all the floor was lifted up, they actually thought it was part of the design, and they actually loved it. So yeah, it was panic stations for a short period of time. Yeah. But members loved the brand, and that's the power of the brand.
Right.
Is they didn't stop anything. People still joined.
Yeah.
So it still worked well.
Yeah. And what about, so obviously from a design perspective and a brand, that was, it was totally unique at its time, and even now, you still go into that club. I remember I remember actually Richard, I think it was Richard, came to me and said, look, we want to do this huge wall of boxing gloves. Can you get me, I think it was like 800 or 900 of these different colours, they had to be blue, yellow, red from memory, and he did this big thing. We shipped these all over from India at the time. So everything about it was very unique in terms of the sort of look and feel. But what else would you say was part of that ingredients that sort of made it what it is today, would you say?
We looked at the industry when we started, and we looked and we said, if you look at any gym, the majority of the gyms, or the people that go to gyms, we said at that stage between 18 and 35. Right. So can you create a brand that really spoke that tone of voice, really appealed to that crowd of people? And I think most gyms before that, they took their attitude of saying, well, we have members from 18 to 80. So the brand, it tried to speak to everyone. Well, Gymbox was very direct. It said, no, this is our target audience, 18 to 35-year-olds. So can you create a gym that appealed in its tone of voice, in how it looked? So when we launched Holborn, like you said, the boxing glove wall, illustrators, we hired a nightclub designer to create the atmosphere. Right. So when you walked into that gym, you'd walked into something that you'd never seen before. So it was literally like walking into a nightclub. So to begin with, as soon as you walked in, you knew it was different. Yeah. We created boxing rings. We thought that rather than teaching these kind of boxing classes inside a studio, if you could get people up into a boxing ring to teach boxing classes, the atmosphere changes completely. You're under the lights, you're inside a boxing ring, you're being taught by professional boxers. So the atmosphere of the class completely changed for that normal studio-based classes. Right. And also, we were also bored of gyms that just didn't do things well. So if they created a free weights area, they didn't do it properly. We wanted to make sure that every area of that gym was done as best as it could. So the free weights area had the best equipment, the best lifting equipment, the best plate loaded equipment. The best cardio areas had the best cardio equipment you had. So not only did you appeal to people that loved exercise, we created classes that you've never seen before. So we appealed to people that loved classes, but also people that were bored of gyms and that wanted to try something different. So we had people coming to do African dance classes. We had people doing break dancing. We had people doing boxing classes by professional boxers. So we created this unbelievable sort of mix mash of classes and weights users and boxers, and the atmospheres were completely different. So it really did work on that front of, as soon as you walked through the door, you knew you were into something different.
Yeah. And how, so, because knowing when you started and your competition at the time, and your price point, you would have, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, you would have been in that sort of mid-market area of where people like Mike and the company he was with at the time, the Fitness First and LA Fitness, were in that similar area. Sort of looking at where things are today, you've continued to survive and thrive. What would you say, why do you think sort of some of those other brands that kind of, they had all the kit and everything of sort of, that business seems to have disappeared, and yet you guys seem to be going from strength to strength,
Well, the original idea was to be mid-market. Yeah. So the idea was, you could pull from the bottom, pull from the top.
Right.
What's happened organically over the years, and this is, I don't think we planned it, is what's happened is the premium brands have got more and more expensive. Yeah. And you've got these budget chains obviously that have come in now, but because the premium brands have got more expensive, we've naturally got more expensive slightly because you've stayed in that kind of, to be mid-market, you can increase slightly. The other thing why I think that we continue to be relevant is we have consistently reinvested into our business on a year-to-year basis. We go into our clubs and we look at how do we make these better? What are the trends? What are things happening? So if you go into Holborn 2003 and you go into Holborn now, it's a completely different club because we've reinvested back into that every single year. And I think that's been part of the success of Gymbox. So, we see what we feel the trends of fitness are going. So obviously functional training came, about 5-6 years ago. The rise of CrossFit, the rise of strength training. We were onto this very, very early stage. And also because of our studio product, we have a very, very good creative team behind our studio product. And what we do is every 3 to 4 months, we introduce new creative classes that we create or we source around the world, and we work with international people to come up with these classes. So we're constantly looking at what we do, reevaluating what we do, and making it better and better and better. And I think that is why. So we are still as relevant now as we were back in 2003.
Yeah. So I guess in some ways you've really continued to innovate that model as opposed to sort of
resting on your laurels, which we never wanted to do. Yeah.
And where do you or your team go to get those new ideas? Is it just because clearly even looking around this, it doesn't look like any traditional health club. Do you get inspiration from other industries, or how does your team sort of come up with where to go next?
Well, from a design aspect, we've worked with the same designer from day one.
Right.
And what the designer's done is they've always taken the building that we go into and looked at how they can progress that design as well. No Gymbox is exactly the same. You know when you walk into a Gymbox that the DNA is a Gymbox, but we try and move the product along all the time. Now, whether that's with lighting or design or interior design. And in terms of fitness, what we do is, I worked with gym chains before where the decision process of how those gyms were made by people that didn't necessarily use gyms a lot, which used to drive me mad. And we've never been a brand like that. We work with young, cool, creative people. We work with fitness people, and we take our leads a lot of the times from those people.
Right.
So, we should know what's happening in terms of, as much as, what Olympic bars that you buy has got to be right for the right areas. Yeah. So we're not scared we don't think that we know everything. We listen to the people that know, and we make sure that we move the product in the right direction by listening to the right people.
Right. Okay. And you've got how many clubs you got planned? You've got a number planned to open yet.
Yeah.
What I guess what's the sort of end goal for the business? Are you sort of plan to continue to be like a sort of boutique niche player? Is it global domination? Where do you?
That's a decision, I suppose, at some stage for someone.
Yeah.
If you're asking me, look, what Gymbox does, it does very, very well. So could this travel? Absolutely, could it travel? Yeah. If you look at key cities around the UK, I could definitely see Gymbox in, like a Manchester or an Edinburgh or somewhere like that. And could it go internationally? Absolutely. I think it's a brand that would suit city centres. So if you go Stockholm, Barcelona, places like that, it would fit in very, very well, because over 13 years, I would have thought there'd have been loads of rival brands come up, but there hasn't. We've seen the rise of the boutiques, which is smaller, single site or single discipline, but there's no one really come out like Gymbox at the moment. So I still think it's got a lot of room to travel.
And do you think that that's because it's not, there are a lot of models, as we all know, where they're probably non-fitness people that, open a space, fill it with kit, open the doors and put a price on it, which I guess, is fairly easy to replicate if you have the investment to do it. But would you say that yours is a bit more of a complex beast in terms of, I suppose as an outsider, it's not straightforward. There's obviously a lot of magic that makes this happen. Would you say that's what's kept you guys sort of probably away? The imitators struggle to have done what you've done. Would you say?
Yeah, maybe. The way that the designer works very much with the people that create the gym space and the equipment that goes in there is a huge part of what we do. So, we spend a lot of time working with the designers to make sure that when we create a space, that space is absolutely right for the discipline that goes into there. Yeah. So I think that's been part of the success of what we do. It's how the designers and the architects work with the fitness people to make sure the space does only look cool. I hate saying cool, as soon as you do, you're no longer cool again, but I'll say it because I can't think of another word. But also it's credible as well. And I think that's really, really important is, we don't just stick a free weights area in there because we think it's there and the head height's too low, so you can't even raise a barbell above your head, or, if you're going to do aerial classes, you've got to have the right space to be able to do that kind of stuff. So that's part of, I think, where we've been very, very successful, is making sure that the harmony between design and functionality really works well together.
And you've done, it sounds like it's been a total success story for 13 years, and a lot of businesses I've met, it's never been the case. Have you had just sort of down times where it's sort of not been, or have you just been lucky and it's been plain? It's
been hard work. You know what? I don't think it's luck. I think the harder we work, the luckier we get. Maybe I think that's the same. But no, I think look, we went through that recession process. In fact, we opened bank literally right at the beginning of the recession, which I can remember everyone literally aging like a year in as soon as we obviously heard that the recession came in. But even through the recession, Gymbox continued to grow through that recession. So I think again that if you look at Londoners, which is obviously where we're based, is Londoners are a fit bunch of people, and sometimes fitness is the last thing that they give up, even through hard times. Now, but what they are is they're very thick about the fitness as well. So you've got to make sure that what you create amazing things each time. And I think that's what we've done, and that's why every single one of our clubs has been successful. We've chosen the right locations, we've built the right clubs, we filled it with the right kind of things. So it's been, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, it's been a really, really fucking hard ride, and I apologise for swearing, but it has. But the other hand, I don't think we've had massive lulls. We've had challenges, but we haven't had times which that things have really dropped off a cliff. That's never happened.
And so with you, obviously, I'm sure it has been hard work, and I know how hard you work and how much effort goes into a lot of these. But what drives and motivates you? Now I guess, in most people's terms, you'd be classed as extremely successful in what you've done and from where you've come from. What kind of gets you up in the morning now and as on a personal level and sort of continues for you to push and be creative?
I think the way the dynamic works with myself and Richard very well is we were both good at different things. We fought like cat and dog, and I think there's still times he wants to punch me and I want to punch him, and and we've come to that in the past. But what gets me up in the morning is I'm still quite passionate about what I do. I come from a sporting background. I'm still interested in sport. I still participate in exercise and sport. So I think what gets me up is I genuinely enjoy making a difference when it comes to and that sounds really, really corny, but I'm passionate about what I do, so making sure that each different area in that gym is equipped to the highest level, that you're pulling elite athletes into first-time exercises. That I'm still passionate about for that, and I think the day that passion disappears, then it's time for me to get out. Yeah. But at this stage, I'm still passionate about it, and I'm still enjoying it. So I think that's still there.
And where do you get your sort of ideas and inspiration? Is it just walking around, or do you, is there anything you read? Do you sort of watch anything? What sort of do you use to feed your mind with ideas, if anything?
Look, I like a lot of people, you go to the industry-related things, but the industry tends to follow. I tend to follow lots of things that. So if I go to gyms, and if I go out to the States and I go to a gym, I wouldn't go to a gym. I tend to go to like sporting academies, or I go to places where I see fitness moving faster. I'm still involved in exercise a lot. I follow sort of CrossFit and Olympic lifting and all that kind of stuff because I'm interested in that. Yeah. And I follow lots of things online. So,
is there any names that you think are sort of any tips that you can share?
Well, it's different. I mean, look, obviously, I love the whole CrossFit thing, even though I find it extremely difficult, especially when it comes to gymnastics and stuff like that. So I follow lots of blogs and things on that kind of stuff. I think people now are doing amazing things in terms of gymnastics and that sort of stuff. So I do follow some bits on that. Some strength like DeFranco's and things like that I look at. And when I go to the States, I try and find those kind of homes to. These well-known strength places to go. I enjoy that kind of stuff. In terms of the classes, like I said, we have a very, very good team beside us who are out there. We have about 5 or 6 people within our studio creative team who are literally out there constantly looking at concepts, looking at ideas, looking at trends, and they present those trends back to us, etc. So A, I listen to them, B, I do my research online because I just enjoy doing that. Yeah. And also I'm involved in the fitness world still and still exercising and still talking to people. So I think that's where the information comes from, really.
Right. And final question then, so what would be your prediction for or your sort of guess on the next 10 years? Will fitness clubs be like they generally are? If you look at central London, will that be how they are in 10 years, or do you think there'll be a major change, or what? What's your prediction on the?
Well, I think people are becoming a lot more educated on fitness. You can only see it. You go into the gyms now, and what people are doing in the gyms now compared to 5 years ago is completely different. Right. So I think people now are electing how they exercise based on what they want to do. To explain that is if they're into strength and conditioning, they're now searching out the places that have the best strength and conditioning areas. If they're into holistic and they do yoga or they do Pilates, etc., they find areas that really specialize in those kind of areas. If they do, if it's like a spin class, it's no good gym operators now still thinking that they can just run these typical spin classes, because the boutiques have proved that it's much more than that. They need to be a whole immersive experience. Instructors need to be the best they can possibly be and trained to teach in time with music and lighting and everything else like that. So I think the way the industry is going is that people are hand-picking how they work out during the week and saying, okay, I need to do 3 strength and conditioning workout. I need to do my mobility because I need to stay mobile. And they're electing to go to different places that specialize, which is why the rise in the boutiques. Right. Where the gym operators can learn from that is they have to learn from that and make sure each of their areas within their gym are the absolute best that they can be. So they have that immersive experience in the studio. They have strength and conditioning areas that are as good as Olympic weightlifting areas or CrossFit gyms. They have combat areas that are as good as if you go to a professional boxing gym. Because then instead of electing to go to loads of different places, you're going to elect to go to one, because I think that's where the future's going, because it's no good just doing the ordinary. You have to do every area as amazing.
David, thanks very much for your time. You've got an awesome concept, and good luck in the future. Thanks so much. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.